Hey everyone, just wanted to do this quick video on how to upgrade a firmware, upgrade the firmwares rather of some Victron inverters. And the firmware update for Victron inverter systems is probably the most risky update that you can do remotely. So you've got to arrange with the customer first that if it fails, then somebody has to go to site, and that has to be you. In my experience, I've had probably a 1 in 20 to 1 in 30 failure rate of firmware updates. And I think that that risk is increased when you do multiple inverter systems. So in this situation, the system that you see behind me is the actual system that we're going to be updating. So I'm going to share the dashboard and show you how to update and talk through it as we go. So here we go. Firmware update. So we've got the normal Victron dashboard here, as you can see. I'll zoom up so that if you're looking at it on a smaller screen, you can see it okay. And what you want to do is go to device list. And here's all our devices. We can see there that the EV charge is offline at the moment. For some reason, maybe it's turned off, not sure. Not really too concerned about that. I'm going to go straight into firmware update. And it's going to scan the network of all the devices that are attached to the GX device. And it's going to tell us the firmware status of each of these devices. Now, when you do a firmware update on, say, the smart solar charge controllers or the Acrono GX, these firmware updates are pretty much seamless, one-click units, one-click wonders, if you like. You just click on update device and it will go through and update them. So I'll give you an example of, I'll update the energy meter now. And if I just click update, you can see there it starts doing the update immediately. And it's pretty seamless. However, when you're going to update the inverters, it's a different story, because whenever you update a device, typically it has to power cycle. So it has to turn itself off, apply the new update of firmware onto the microchips and the boards and everything like that, and then power itself back up again. And the inverters also have another process that they have to go through. So when you power up when you update the firmware on an inverter, you also have to update the software to match that firmware. So they make you download the software, and then it amalgamates it with or updates it to the latest software. Very simple process, but it happens on your PC. And also then you upload it back to the server. But the main risk is this, that you're using the internet and their local internet connection to update the firmware. And when the inverters do a power cycle to apply that new firmware, it's going to turn the site off. And so what you've got there is you are sitting here on your laptop and you have no idea whether that site is powered back up again or not, unless you're on the phone to the customer. In this case, the customer is away from the house. So we are just going to have to wait for that maybe 3 or 4 or 5 minute period where the internet router reboots itself because the power's come back on. It makes another connection, the system connects to it, and then finally we see on the dashboard it comes back up live. So I'm going to click update device. What it does here is it gives you a whole lot of warnings. So the inverter charger is the heart of a Victron power system. Before continuing, make sure to fully understand each step. The new firmware is uploaded to the GX device. The configuration is then retrieved from the VE bus system. Now, whenever it says VE bus system, it's talking about the inverters. The inverter is switched off and the firmware is updated. Be aware that there is no AC power available, which means there's no internet connection. Unless you've got a UPS on the internet, which would be quite nice, but not everyone has that. After the firmware update is completed, the settings will be reset to defaults. To prevent overcharging, the charge current will be set to 0 amps. Okay, and then the inverter is switched on again. The internet connection will be re-established in this case, in case it was lost. The new settings template is retrieved from the system, after which it will be uploaded to your web browser. And then that's the first stage complete. Then we need to reopen that uploaded system configuration. The settings will be automatically converted to the new firmware version, and pop-up will show in case anything needs to be double-checked. Then we close the configurator and prompt it to store the file, and away we go. Then you upload it, go to device list, remote VE configure, and upload the new settings. I understand. Process. Great. Confirm. Make sure to switch off PV inverters. Now, I'm not going to do this, and I'm going to exit this at the moment and quickly show you that we have PV inverters on the system. Now, the reason it says to disconnect them or turn them off is because at the moment they're charging the battery. And if that battery were to be 100% charged at the time, or close to 100% charged at the time we start this process, then what happens is that when it's programmed, the inverters are defaulted, and so there is no way of the Victron system to control the PV inverters. And so the charging, the batteries may end up getting overcharged. So you really don't want that. But in this case, we're at 66% charge, so we've got plenty of time to visit the site and reset the whole system before those batteries get fully charged, if this firmware update fails. So firmware update, we go back to that again, and we're going to start and go through the process. So I'm going to click here, update device. We've already read through that. Confirm. I understand, and I would like to continue, so I haven't necessarily turned them off. The device is not powered by the inverter, so the GX device can't be just plugged into a power point and then powered from that. The GX device has to be powered from the battery DC bus. I understand, because it is. There's no VE bus BMS. There is a BMS, but it's not a VE bus BMS. The digital multi-control, there's nothing like this on the site, so I understand, and I will confirm and understand the risks. Be aware that in the case that something goes wrong, however unlikely, it might be necessary to send someone onto site. So I've already talked to the installer. They've requested this be done, so I'm going to do this, and away we go. And this is how it looks. So by the time we kind of get through to around about this writing firmware to device point, this is where the system ends up disconnecting from the internet. And so often what will happen is we'll get to one of these points here, and if there is no UPS on the internet connection, then it'll hang, and it can hang here for 5 or 10 minutes. So we're preparing it. You can see there. It's going to go through and go step by step. So I'm going to pause the recording at this point, just for information. It is 9:25 a.m. at the time of this recording. So I'll record it and I'll let you know how many minutes has elapsed. Okay, you can see we've progressed a little bit there. That's 1 minute elapsed. It's now 9:26 a.m. And I'll pause the recording again And it's now 9:27, and you can see there that the progress bar is still zipping along at a rate. However, this may or may not be deadly accurate. It's saying it's writing the firmware to the device, which basically means we've probably done a power cycle on the site by now, and we're going to need to just wait and find out whether it's been successful or not. The next step that will happen is we'll get a download into our download folder up here, and we'll be able to open it, writing firmware to device, see, restoring VBus system configuration. This is good to see. We've actually got some progress here, so it seems like we've had one power cycle and it's come back, and waiting for service restart. So let's see how long this takes. So the next stage in this process is it's now going to download the VE config file, which we need to open. Then we need to save it onto our system, and then we need to upload that file back to the inverters, which also, when you upload that file, it's also going to do another power cycle. So there's going to be between 3 and 4 power cycles usually on the site over the course of 30 to 40 minutes if everything runs nice and smoothly. I will pause this again. It is now 9:30. I'll pause it again, and we can restart, come back when it's time to have a look at that VE config file. Oh, maybe I don't need to pause it. It looks like it might be about to download that. There we go. And we've got a download there. So I'm going to click on that. This is doing some things in the background. I could share my first screen with you so you can see what's happening there. It's opening up the VE config files. And converting them, saving them back into the main one for each inverter. This is the third one. See there, it's converting it. And then it's saying the file conversion is complete. Next steps, close the VEBus system configurator, which is this one. The reason you have the system configurator, well, we don't need to explain that, I guess, but that's for multiple inverter systems. If you've never seen this before, but you will see this when you do a firmware update. Save the merged file when asked for. Send this file to the remote system. Okay, so we'll close it. Yes, we'll save that. And I'll save that under downloads. Don't have to rename it anything because it'll be the latest version according to the timestamp. So I'll click save. Now I will go back and share this screen. And then we're going to go to device list. Remote VE configure. I can upload that, but what I am now going to do is I'm going to open the dashboard in a new tab and just double check what's happening on the dashboard. So you can see here we've got charging happening from the grid. So this indicates that the inverters are set as default, which is off grid, and seeing the grid and using it as a generator and dumping that into the battery. Okay, and it's also going to be using the PV inverter system. So got plenty of headroom in that battery, but we wouldn't want this to be happening if the batteries are full, or if there's a limitation on the generator itself. If it is actually an off-grid system and you've got the generator running, it would likely overload the generator. So we'll jump back into here, we'll click upload, select the file, and I'm in my downloads folder, and I can see there's the latest one, 9:32 a.m., and it's 9:33 now. And you can see there it says merged at the bottom. So I'm going to double click on that, and that's going to upload. While it's uploading, you can look at the dashboard, and you'll see some of the displays in the dashboard will stop communicating properly and may not make sense. You see there it says off on the inverter. So it's going to do a power cycle on this inverter as well once it's uploaded this file. See the progress of that upload happening there now. And then it will power cycle the site. The good thing is we're still seeing real time here, so we may well have a UPS on the internet connection. I'm not certain. So there we go. It looks like that's completely reset itself. It's dumped off the grid. We can show the details on this as well, so we can see the frequency here. When it tries to connect to the grid under ESS or a generator, the frequency will be fluctuating around to try and synchronize, and also the voltage, the output voltages will be fluctuating around a bit. Let's just have a look and see what happens to it. I'll hide the details so it compacts that. The other thing you can do is jump into the remote console and have a look at the actual data that's shown on the inverter. So I like using the new UI for a couple of reasons. It's quicker, and it's actually a completely different UI, obviously, but eventually that's what everything's going to go to. But if I just exit here, I can see behind me that something has happened. We're now connected to the grid, and it looks like it's running in a good ESS state, which is optimized. PV chargers are working. PV inverters haven't come back on yet. What typically happens is the system will lift the frequency up instantaneously to 53 hertz, which will dump off the PV inverters, and that happens just before you connect to the grid. And then the PV inverters will take, 30 seconds or a minute or so to actually reconnect back into the system and start producing again. Looks like we're producing now. There we go. And so that appears to be all stable. Now, what you want to do is go back to your device list, go back to firmware update, it'll run its scan, and you want to double check that that firmware is now the latest version, so it has taken. And then you want to go back to device list and go back to the VE config and actually download the VE config file. So you can see there, we're now up to date on that firmware version. And so now what you want to do is go back to, so now what we want to do is go back to the device list, click on Remote VE Configure, and then we're going to download the VE config file. Click download. It won't take too long. And once we've done that, we'll open it. And there it is. So I'm going to click on that and open up, share my other screen so we can see it. And so what you want to do here is you click on these boxes here and it shows you the inverter that is assigned to line 1, line 2, and line 3, okay? And so you'll right click, don't worry about the right hand one, that's just the control of the second AC input on that inverter. So it's just a phantom kind of, I actually don't know why it's there. We should find out, I guess. So here we go. If we go right click on the inverter itself, VE configure, and this is opening up the software just for this inverter. So we look at this and I go, yeah, well, that's not default, that's for sure. So that's good. And then we've got the various settings that we have in the inverter system, and I can just quickly whip across there and I can tell that all of those settings are good. I'll do a summary on the ESS assistant. Yep, that's all good. So I'll close that. It's going to open it back up, and then I'll go the same with the other one. This is just a double check to make sure that the software has actually taken. Very seldom does it not take, but if it doesn't, you've got a system that's limping along and you're assuming it's all programmed correctly, but it's dropped something out. So it's a good idea to just double check that everything's all good in there. Which is in there. Yeah, everything is good. Everything is awesome. Excuse me. All right. So that is your firmware update process for a multi-inverter system. It's very similar for a single inverter system. Be always aware that you may have to visit the site. I've had to visit the site or send someone to site probably, I don't know, 10 times since I've been doing remote firmware updates. So it is a real thing and it is a pain. So you've got to be prepared. Usually you want to do it maybe when you're sending a staff member or you're going past yourself and you're intending to go close to the site. So get that firmware update done. Talk to the customer first, obviously. And if the customer has a bypass switch or something like that built into the system, even better. That means they can carry on. If there's a problem, they can just go click, click, and bypass over to the grid or bypass over to the generator and keep running the site until such a time as you actually get there. So thank you and enjoy. Let me know if you would like anything in particular for me to talk about on these videos, and see you on the next one.